Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name's Mark. I'll be hosting this session. It is now mandatory for me to be wearing a face mask in the office, but due to accessibility for people who may be a bit harder of hearing or need to see lips as well to be able to understand properly, I've been allowed to take my mask off. So we are trying to follow the rules, but just for the next maybe hour. We'll give it a couple more minutes, let a few more people join in. We do have a chat function, so as the screen says, all your webcams have been muted, have turned off, and your microphone's muted, just so there's not a big excess of background noise. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. I've got my colleague here, Glenn, who will be in the background answering any questions, and then, we might cover it as well. So what I might get you guys to do, if you can just type in the chat whether you can hear me or not, just a simple yes or no, or if you're having any audio problems there. Hey, hello, yes. A couple of people, great. Thanks to those who said you can hear. It's fantastic. Should help this go a little bit smoother. And thank you for taking your time to be on our webinar. It's good. Hope no one's going to be affected too much by these new restrictions that have been put in place this afternoon. Haven't been caught up too much in all the COVID dramas over the last couple of, I don't know, year, 12, 18 months, whatever it's been, too long. Bronwyn can't hear. It may be your audio, unfortunately. Most of the other people are able to hear and have said they can hear. Is anyone else having troubles hearing me? No? Okay. Bronwyn, are you using headphones at all? Sometimes that might help the audio issue. Okay, great. Thanks, Nicole, for that. Okay, might just give it another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll kick off. Try to get you guys out of here on time. Yeah. So just again, for those who have just joined, there are the new mandatory mask wearing in workplaces, but due to accessibility reasons and us making this recording available in the future for people who need to be able to read lips or not have the muffling of the mask, we've been given permission for me to not have my mask on while I'm presenting to you. Other than that, I've been wearing it like a good boy since 4 o'clock. Okay. So look, what we might do is we might kick off if people come in afterwards. They can just join in from where we're at. As I said, Glenn will be in the background answering your questions on the chat, so feel free to ask away. So what we're covering today is working with children check compliance. As I said, I'm Mark Laurenti. I'm the Compliance Planning Officer for the compliance team in the Office of the Children's Guardian. So what we're going to be covering today in this session is going to be what is the Working with Children check and who in your organisation requires one, what is a verification and why that is important, what different results you can get from a verification. So there are multiple different outcomes you can get once you do that verification. So I'll go through those a little bit and what they mean for you and also your worker. What your responsibilities are as a child-related employer. So there's a few that you need to meet to be compliant with legislation. So we'll explain all those. The kind of records you'll need to keep and how us as a compliance team make sure that employers are doing the correct thing, and why it's important that as an organisation you're not over-reliant on the Working with Children check to keep the kids safe within your organisation. Oops, sorry, went too far. Okay, so a bit of a background of the compliance team. One of our main roles is to audit and monitor the Working with Children check requirements. So there's 29,000 roughly employers registered currently in our system. So we deal with all of those all day, whether it be in relation to barred applicants or change of status or just making inquiries about their compliance levels. We provide information and education. So this is our second only webinar. Our first one was this morning. But prior to the COVID hitting, we were actually doing these sessions out and about across New South Wales, traveling around, getting groups of 20 to 30 people in a room and just having those face-to-face conversations as well. So that was a big part of what we were doing as well. As I said, we notify all the employers of a status change in any of your workers' clearances, whether that be a bar or they become closed. And we also respond to allegations of non-compliance. So we get a lot of allegations come through in many different ways. I will touch on that a little bit later. But we also have a dedicated team within compliance that are basically responsible for investigating all those allegations to ensure that no serious harm is there. So just a very quick poll. We're going to ask, there'll be a couple of polls throughout it just to get people's opinions. Have you been contacted previously by OCG compliance in your organisation? Okay, answers coming through thick and fast, which is good. Okay, give it another 30 seconds, let the last couple of people get their votes in. Okay, so 62% of you have said no. You've never been contacted by the compliance team. That could be a really good thing, meaning that you're doing the right thing. There's no dramas with any of your workers and you can just keep doing what you're doing, which is fantastic. 10% have said yes. It's not always a bad thing when we contact you. And 28% unsure. So, sorry, just struggling to get back to my screen. Okay. So, what is a Working with Children check, or the WWCC, which you'll see on my slides throughout? It's just a lot easier to say. It's a legal requirement for anyone who is 18 years or over, who is employed or volunteers in any child-related work. So when we assess the application, when you first apply, you go confirm your details at the Service New South Wales. It then comes back to us and it runs through what we call an ACIC search. So we'll look at a full national criminal history, any workplace records that have been reported by employers, and notifications by the reportable conducts team, who now fall under the Children's Guardian. So that could be misconduct in the workplace that's been reported either against another worker or children in the organisation. So we look at all of that before we will then provide someone a clearance. So the people who do need a check within your organisation are the workers who are in direct face-to-face contact with children. So that's the key one there. They have to be in direct contact. So it's not incidental contact. It's your teachers, your coaches, daycare educators, religious leaders, all those sorts of roles. It has to be a primary part of the role that you do. It's also for workers who are providing ongoing counselling, mentoring, or distance education for children using any form of communication. That any form of communication refers more to online tutors. So, for instance, if you have a tutor who lives in Coffs Harbour, for instance, but your child is in Wollongong, even though it's only via online, they still require a working with children check to be able to provide that tutoring. And if they are a sole trader, there is the option where a parent can actually do an individual verification to make sure that that person is also cleared. And adult household members who are reside in a family daycare or out-of-home care organisation. So family daycares, if there's any other adults present besides the operators, to be in that house while there's children present, they are required to hold a valid working with children check as well. Same for out-of-home care. Anyone who resides on the property has to have that valid clearance to be able to live there. And other designated roles. So that can be a bit wishy-washy, but basically what that means is primarily it's for, say, principal officers of designated agencies, roles that have access to, say, confidential records for children. Our roles that we hold in the organisation, we also have to hold a valid clearance because of the access to information that we have. It's deemed important that we have that clearance to be able to perform our roles and do them well and make sure they're employing the right people to have access to that information. So the people who don't need a check within your organisation, anyone under 18. So as I said before, it's only a check for people who are 18 years and older. They do need a check if you have someone in your organisation, for instance, who is 17, coming up to turning 18 soon. They'll need a clearance once they turn 18, straight off the bat. So they are able to actually apply at 17 years and 9 months, get that process rolling. So it's always good practice if you do have anyone hovering around that age that's going to stay on once they turn 18. It's good to get the process started that little bit earlier, just so it's ready to go basically once they turn 18 and you're all in the clear for that. Anyone who has incidental contact with children doesn't require a check. So that would be, say, your maintenance people who would go into a school or a daycare centre, for instance, to fix some lights or do any form of maintenance. They're not there to work with the children. They just happen to be in the presence of a child. So they're not required to have a clearance for that role. Same as there are roles, this came up in our earlier webinar, a cook for a daycare centre. The cook goes in the back door, goes straight into the kitchen, works a few hours prepping the food, leaves the food there to be served out by the educators, and then leaves. Has nothing to do with children. Even though they are in the daycare centre, they don't require a clearance because they're having nothing to do with children. And close family relatives. So as a parent or a brother or sister, grandparent, for instance, if you're volunteering in an activity that your own child is participating in, you're not required to have a clearance to do that role. For instance, if you wanted to coach your child's netball or soccer team, you don't need it. If you were to coach someone else's team that your child's not in, then yes, you would need it. It gets a bit confusing. As long as your child is in the activity that you are coaching or participating in, you fall under that family exemption. So the only exemption to that exemption is for overnight camps. As soon as that overnight comes into it, that's when the clearance is required because you've got access after hours, not just to your own child, but other children as well. So best practice, you know your organisation's roles better than anyone to know which roles would be child-related, which roles aren't child-related, and who needs a working with children check. There's plenty of information in the legislation on our website. It'll run through the exemptions. It'll run through the different kinds of roles within each work sector of who does need it, and then you can go through the exemptions as well. But as it says at the bottom there, we're happy to provide some guidance if you're unsure. We can not tell you matter-of-factly someone has to have one or not. That needs to be your decision, but we can definitely push you in the right direction. So one of the key things about being compliant with your obligations is having an employer registration. So hopefully everyone here has a registration already, because that enables you to verify your workers. So if you don't have one, you just go onto our website and click that little button there that's circled, hit register. It'll take you through. You enter all your details on there about your business and some contact people, and then that'll give you username, password, and then you're ready to access the system and start verifying your workers. So the next poll question is, are you the person, or do you know who the responsible person is within your organisation for working with children check verifications and record keeping? Just give it another 30 seconds to let people pop their answers up. Okay, so 10% are unsure. The rest know that, yes, they're either the responsible person or they know who is the responsible person, which is great. So when it comes to verifying the Working with Children check, same page, same spot on our website, except under register it says longer than verify. Hopefully you will have access to your username and password to get in. If you don't, you can always contact our customer service if you're having troubles logging in, and they'll be able to step you through the process of how to get back in there so you can log in and verify. It's pretty simple. You hit that button, then it goes down to username and password. And then when it gets to verifying, there's 4 different variables you need to be able to perform that verification. So you'll need a surname, and it's important that you only put the surname. It's not a full name, it's just their last name. Sorry. And it's important that you ensure the spelling is correct. It has to be as it is on their ID that they would have taken to Service New South Wales. Any differences, it won't allow you to perform the verification. Next thing you'll need is their date of birth, and then either their Working with Children check number or their application number. And people can work on an application number. Sometimes the process does take a bit longer for people to get their clearance. So we make it possible for them to work under the application number. The important thing to remember is, though, that once they receive that full Working with Children check number, is that you then go back on and re-verify. So what is a verification? It's more than a piece of paper. That first one says. Why we say that is, during our auditing, we've had instances where we'll contact an organisation and ask, have you verified your workers? And they're like, yep, they give us the piece of paper with their number on it and we chuck it in their file and it goes away in the drawer. That's not verifying. Verifying is actually going online, doing the login, doing all those details, and then hitting verify. That piece of paper gets given to everyone who initially gets a clearance. So the importance of verifying, it then allows you to know an up-to-date status of that clearance. So someone could have applied 3 years ago and been cleared, and then 2 months ago, they've gone through a risk assessment and then they've become barred. Doing that verification will allow you to know an up-to-date, to-the-minute status of their clearance and let you know that they're able to work for you. The other thing it does is put that permanent link between your workers and your organisation. So that's for future reference. If, again, a status change comes up and we need to speak to you about someone that you've previously verified, we know directly who to speak to. We don't have to go through hours of file notes and time trying to figure out where they work. You've done the verification. We know that they either do work with you or have previously worked with you, and it makes that process a lot quicker for us to give you that important information if they're still engaged by you. And lastly, what is it? It's a legal requirement. It's written in the legislation. There are penalties that can apply for non-compliance. We do always try and take a very educative approach first, but for very significant matters, as I said, there are breaches that there are penalties that can apply per breach. So a bit of a case study, why it's important for you to verify your workers, like I've just spoken about. So the reason for that is not too long ago in one of our audits, we came across an organisation who had multiple staff working with kids who they hadn't ever verified. We talked them through the process, got them registered as an employer, got them to verify their workers. Within a week, one of their workers came back as an automatic bar, which means they were deemed a very high risk to be working with kids. So now that we had that verification, we were able to get that process done nice and quick, ring the organisation straight away, let them know that that person's barred and has to be removed immediately. Without that verification, we might not have had access to any information of where that person worked, which means we would never have been able to know that they had a high-risk worker there, interacting one-on-one with these kids, being left alone. So that's a really big reason that verification is something that we'll continually push and we'll always talk about. It's the most important thing you can do with someone's working with children check. Put that link between yourselves. So for record keeping, what we'll look for, it doesn't have to be this way. What you're seeing on screen at the moment is a template that's available on our website. It's free to download. It's nice and easy. It's just if you ever do get contacted, having this information there makes it a lot easier to have things done and get that process rolling quickly. So you'll need a full name. So it's easier if you have their first, middle, and last name, just in case we've got to contact you about John Smith and you've got 6 John Smiths working for your organisation. You'll need the date of birth, their working with children check, or their application number, the date that you verified them, what the outcome of that verification was, and also their expiry date, and whether they're a paid or volunteer worker. We put expiry date in there because even though our office will let your workers know when their working with children check is coming up for renewal, we give them 3 months notice. It's good for organisations to have their own systems in place to make sure that their workers don't lapse, basically, and start working without a valid clearance. Because on the day of expiry, after that clearance is closed, they then have to go through the process of reapplying, getting a new clearance, which can then take some time before they can be engaged again in a child-related role. So it's great if organisations have their practices in place, know that someone's coming up for an expiry, and that's how it's done. This is also all the information we'll ask if you're ever audited. So we'll ask for all this information when you verified what their working with children check number is, date of birth, so we can match it to our system as well. Again, you don't have to have it that way that's on screen as long as you've got those kinds of records kept for all of your workers in child-related roles. And a final question. Are you an authorised contact for any urgent working with children check matters in your organisation? Okay, a couple more seconds for people to get their votes in. Okay, so we've got around half of you. Oh, look at that, spot on half of you aren't the nominated person. Most of you are yes, some of you are unsure. I will apologise, the cleaner is starting to vacuum behind me, so I'm sorry if that comes through at all. So the reason we ask that question is it's coming up when we have to notify you, we need to speak to a nominated contact. The reason for that is because of confidentiality issues. We can't just go telling anyone within your organisation that there's been a status change and what that status change is. We need a key person who is responsible for working with children check matters that we can discuss with. So it's really important that those 2 people on your employer registration are the ones that we can speak to. So the understanding the status of your working with children check verifications. These 2, sorry, is that vacuum coming through really loudly? Can a couple of people just type yes or no for me? I do apologise. No? Awesome. Okay, good. Good. Okay. So the green ticks, these are the good to goes. An application in progress. Like I said before, sometimes the process does take that little bit longer to go through all the record checking, especially for very common names. It can take a while. Some people will get a clearance within a couple of hours. Some people it can take a couple of weeks. We don't want to hinder their employment. So as long as they've got that application in progress, they're allowed to legally work for you. You get the same checking in the same process. If that status changes in the time frame that before they get a full clearance, we'll advise you anyway. The next one is cleared. Basically means they've gone through all the background checking. They're good to go. They can be engaged up until the listed expiry date. Clearance lasts for 5 years unless someone does something to change that status and gets charged. These ones are the big red X. These are the ones we don't want to see when you're trying to verify someone. If any of these results come up once you do a verification, the person you're verifying cannot be engaged in any form of child-related work. So the top one is barred. A final decision has been made on that person's clearance. We've looked at all their criminal history and their records, and it's been deemed that they're at risk to be engaged with kids, so they're no longer allowed to work for you. A final bar lasts for 5 years from the date of that. So someone can't apply after a year and try and get back in the system. That bar is in place for 5 years. An interim bar, it means the applicant has been barred for a period of time because we're still waiting on an outcome of a risk assessment. The time frame of a risk assessment can vary very differently. It depends on how engaging the person is with us. So when someone's going to go through a risk assessment, we have a whole team of people who will contact them, talk them through the process, advise them what we need for them to return. We also look and ask for references from any workplaces they've been, especially if they're in child-related work, to get a bit of a background of the person. Again, like I said, it varies very much on how much they engage and how long it can take for us to get information. Sometimes we'll ask for information from other government agencies as well or other workplaces, and that can take time to process. So if for some reason you ever do have someone, hopefully you won't, but if you do have someone going through a risk assessment, that could be the reason it's taking so long. They're more than welcome to ring our risk assessment team, and they'll be able to talk them through about an estimated time frame. The next result is not found. It means that we can't match your data entry into something that's in our system. A couple of reasons for that could be a lot of the time will be, like I said, data matching. Could be a spelling error in the surname. Sometimes people are putting in full names. Could be the letters are incorrect. The numbers are incorrect in the date of birth. It could be that they've put too many W's or C's when typing in the Working with Children check number. It could be that they're using the letter O instead of 0. If you continually get that not found result, feel free to give us a call. We've got access to a report we can run, and we can try and find where the discrepancy is and help you out. The other reason that you might get a not found is when someone applies for a clearance. If they don't go to Service New South Wales to confirm their identity within a certain period of time, that application gets closed and doesn't proceed. So the next option is closed. Someone can get closed for a number of reasons. Could be due to they have an undisclosed alias, which they haven't advised us of. So through the process of the application, we do ask you for any previous names you've been known by. That could be a maiden name, or if you've just completely changed your name to start a new life, who knows. The other reason is you could also have a current application. You might have forgotten you've had a clearance in the past. It could have been a few years since you've done something in child-related roles. So you go in and apply for a new one. If you already have a clearance on our system, the second clearance will automatically get closed off. And lastly, if you do not cooperate through the risk assessment process, so we give someone 3 months to respond to the request for information. If someone doesn't respond within that 3 months, after that, we'll close down that application. They can't work. It's now an issue if they continue to work. So they'll have to go through the process of reapplying, which then means they're also then going to have to go straight back into the risk assessment process, and it just extends that time frame so much more. And expired is basically what it says. Their clearance is expired. They've let it run out. They haven't gone and renewed it in time, and they can't work with children until they begin a new process of getting that application going. Sorry, 2 seconds. Go.
Hey guys, sorry, Lynn here. Hey Mark, just questions come through
Yes.
about how often you should verify employees? Someone said that sometimes it's 2 months, yearly, is it once?
Yeah.
And what happens when you verify, I guess? What does it do at our end?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a one-off thing. As soon as someone begins their employment with you, you verify. It's a one-time for the duration of their clearance. The only next time you'd have to verify them is upon the expiry or them providing you their renewal working with children check. Once you do that verification, it lasts for 5 years. You will be forever linked to that person until their clearance runs out. Just to make your life easier, you don't always have to go back and do it. Some people do like to do it to keep their records up to date, or just for peace of mind. That's fine. If you're one of those people who likes to verify, say once a year, it does nothing to our system. It still shows that you're linked. It just shows that you've verified them a couple of different times. It doesn't affect us very much at all. It's just the one-time thing is basically to save you a lot of time, especially people who have staff that stay on for a long time and have a lot of staff. Don't want to be going in and doing it every couple of months. We will always notify you of that status change when it happens. When we do that, we'll ask you if they're still engaged. If they are, then we can provide information. If they're not still engaged, then it's not a problem at all. This also came up while we're on verification. I'll mention it. There is no way to unlink someone to you. So you can't unverify someone. You can't log in and remove them from the fact that you've ever verified them. It's just that process of if we ever have to contact you, we'll just ask and say, is John Smith still engaged? You'll say, no, he left 2 years ago. Thank you very much. And that's all the information we'll need. So what you need to do if you ever do hear from us and you have a BARD or an interim BARD worker, if someone is placed under a bar or an interim bar, you will be contacted by us, always by phone if we can. We'll always attempt to make contact via phone first so we can have that discussion with you. If not, we might send an email asking you to confirm if someone's engaged still or to make contact with us urgently. Once that phone call happens, you have to immediately remove that person from their role. There's a couple of ways you can do it. For example, you can suspend them from a child-related work if that's an interim bar. You wouldn't want to do that for a complete finalised bar because it's 5 years. But while they go through that risk assessment process, you can suspend them, or you can transfer them to a non-child related role within your organisation. If you are a workplace that doesn't have anything that isn't child related, everything to do with your organisation is child related, you can terminate someone. It's a requirement of their role to have that clearance to perform that duty. You don't have a role for them to do. You'll be backed, basically, if they want to take further action. It's in the instances where they're not particularly in child-related work that you've made everyone get a clearance. Somehow you found out they're barred and then you can get rid of them. That's where we can't help you because they should have never had a clearance in the first place and it shouldn't be a determining factor. It's really important. It's an offence to continue to engage a barred worker in any form of child-related work. Again, penalties apply. We have the power to issue up to $11,000 to any organisation found to be in breach of these. We're thankful it hasn't never come to that. People take it very seriously when we advise them someone's barred. They always remove them and provide us the advice of what steps they've taken, whether it was to be terminate them or move them into a different role that they're not required to interact with kids anymore. So for renewing the Working with Children check, it's a brief overview. First clearance is expired in 2018. So Working with Children check in its current form has been around for 8 years now. Like I said previously, every check is valid for 5 years unless one of those status changes occurs. It's really important if you have staff who have to renew, advise them that they have to renew, not reapply. If they reapply for a clearance, it's just going to get closed, like we discussed, and then they're going to have to start the process again of renewing, which could mean that it lapses. As an organisation, you're required to re-verify that worker's renewed Working with Children check number. If they're still engaged, obviously, if they've left and renewed it, it's not your problem. But if they still work for you, you have to re-verify. That gives you a new status, or it could be the same status if they're still cleared. lets you know that it's still valid and they haven't let it lapse, and it gives you a new record of an expiration date. And like I said, again, applicants, they can renew up to 3 months before it expires. If they reapply, renew early, it does not affect that initial expiry date. It's always going to stay on the end of the expiry. It just means that they can get that process started a bit sooner. At the moment, there are delays, unfortunately, with our applications. Out of our hands, it's due to the ACIC search and all the background information we have to look for. They have big delays on their end, which then affects us because we can't progress an application until we get all the cleared information back from them. So it might be worth noting, if you do have anyone that you know who needs to either apply or renew, get them to start that process early, because there is that little bit of a backlog, unfortunately. So the way that we assess compliance within our team is mainly through our auditing program, which we're going to assess everything that we talked about this evening. We're going to make sure that you have a valid employer registration and that you're verifying all your workers who are in child-related roles. We're going to make sure that you're keeping accurate records. So we'll ask, like I said, for that similar template with their name, their date of birth, their number, their expiry date, what their status was, when you verified them, all those sorts of things. We'll also look at if you're applying exemptions, because it then comes into confidentiality where we can't let you know anything. If someone's technically exempt within your organization, but then you've made them go get a clearance anyway, we can't provide you any information on their status changes, because they're not legally required to hold one to do their role. As it says, we could also request a copy of your workers in child-related work. What we do then is we'll match it to your verification history, which we can access, and we'll make sure that everyone on the list that you've provided has been verified by your organization. There's a lot of times where someone will provide us a name and they're working with Children Check, but they haven't actually done the online process. Someone's not verified until that online verification has happened, and you get that result of cleared application in progress. So after all that, as part of working with Children Week this week, online we actually have a self-assessment tool that people are able to establish their own levels of compliance, things they might need to work on, things they might need to come and ask us for assistance with, just to let you know where you're sitting. Could come in handy because start a new financial year, we're going to be starting our new round of audits. If you're contacted and you've used this tool, that audit is probably going to go a lot smoother, or for future reference, or just so you know and have peace of mind that you're doing what you need to be doing. It's a free tool. Again, it's on our website under resources. It helps you assess what roles in your organization are child related and what roles aren't. It goes through some of those steps and some of those exemptions where you might not be 100% certain if someone requires a clearance or not. This will help you figure that out. And like I said, it checks your levels of compliance requirements. It'll ask you if you're registered. Do you have access to your registration? Do you have the 2 nominated contacts that we can discuss matters with? Have you verified all your workers? Are you keeping the accurate records? This just helps you know that you're compliant. Even if we never have to speak to you in regards to an audit, it'll be good for you to have, knowing that you're doing the right thing. So one of the big issues we find in the compliance team is that people are over-reliant on the working with children check. They just put a blanket rule in and say every person in the organisation has to have a clearance, whether you're the cleaner who comes in after hours, if you're the cook, or if you're frontline working with kids. Everyone holding a working with children check does in no way keep the kids in your organisation safe. So the working with children check is only a point in time clearance. So when you apply, we can look at all the history, which might deem you to be a risk to children, or in the future, any new charges or allegations or reports through workplace misconduct automatically get linked to that clearance. So for the 5 years of a working with children check, that monitoring is ongoing. So as soon as someone gets pinged by the police for something, it comes through on our end and we can start assessing whether that makes them a risk to kids. But you can have someone who is very good at hiding what they do. History has shown, unfortunately, that there are plenty of those people out there who have never been charged, never been caught, and are still offending. So them holding a working with children check isn't going to help keep the kids safe. I'll touch base a little bit later, in a couple of minutes, about different ways you can keep kids safe that our child safe team actually really focus on. The other reason for an over-reliance on working with children check is that it hinders people's employment. For some people, yes, they do have a history. They've completely turned their life around. They've gotten a family, they've gotten kids. If someone wants to help out for an hour or two at their kid's soccer to bring out some water or something like that, it shouldn't hinder them that they've had a past. They don't require the clearance. They're never going to be alone with children. That's where that exemption comes in. It also creates mass amounts of pressure on our working with children check system. So if you go back to the people I just talked about that have that history, that criminal history, we're holding up our system with people that don't need to be in there, where people can't get a clearance to start work, or we could be missing the people who need to be risk assessed, who are just sitting there as an application in progress for too long because we're having to process all these clearances for people who don't actually require them. We're not the largest organisation, unfortunately, so there's small teams in each different section that work on these. So it does take time to go through all those records to make recommendations of where it goes. So it's really important that the people who need a clearance, yes, get them to do it if they're in child-related work. If they're not having anything to do with kids, don't get them to have a working with children check. It does nothing for you. And again, it creates confidentiality issues. We can't tell you anything about someone if they don't require a clearance to do their role. It's a breach of the Privacy Act. There could be penalties that apply for you and for me. So we're never going to breach that confidentiality. We'll ask a number of questions of your organisation first if we ever have to contact you about someone. And depending on how you answer those questions is whether we'll give you any further information or not. That's to protect everyone involved. So the way you can keep kids safe is through all the training that we have made available. We've got a dedicated team of child safe trainers and coordinators who provide, at the moment, not face-to-face training, but they can do online webinars such as this, talking about different practices you can put in place, different policies to keep children safe. Something as simple as, if you're a footy club or you're out on a day trip with a daycare, get two people to take one of the children to the toilet. Make sure there's always that second person around so nothing can happen. Remove the opportunities, basically. And that's different ways you can make sure you keep kids safe. Do different kinds of background checking. Do your reference checking on people. Don't just determine that if they've got a clearance, they're a good person. If they don't have a clearance, they're a bad person. It doesn't always work that way. Helps you create a proactive approach to child safety. We provide multiple tools to help you meet the standards. We offer a free e-learning course, which anyone has access to. You can do it at your own time, so you don't have to sit down and knock it all out in one hit. If you've only got 20 minutes every couple of days to do that, then that's fine. Do it at your own pace. It's sweet as. Face-to-face training, again, due to COVID, has been paused, but you can request us to host webinars. We do want webinars specifically for certain organisations. You can request one to only train your own staff, or we can open them up to anyone to attend, kind of like we've done tonight. All these programs are on our website. They're all available. They're all free. Any kind of training and information we provide is never charged for. So it's good for organisations to take that opportunity. There's a lot of organisations out there trying to do a bit lesser work than us around child safety that will charge you an arm and a leg. So take advantage of the free stuff that we've got going. We're all very professional and we know what we're talking about. So coming up is the child safe standards. Some of you may have heard of them and some of you may not. 10 child safe standards will be coming into place after recommendations from the Royal Commission. The 10 standards, I don't expect you to be able to read it on that small screen. It's kind of just there to be there. It helps child safe practices, which are then informed by the standards. So there's different ways of creating a child safe environment for the children within your organisation, which all of this does. The standards provide the framework for embedding the child safe practices through policies, systems and processes. And it's also to assist the implementation of the standards we spent a lot of time developing the guide to child safe practices. The guide and the standards and all the information you'll need for that, again, is all on our website, which can be just accessed for free. If you get stuck finding it, feel free to shoot us an email or a phone call. We can easily send you some links. So the compliance team, so for the last 2 years, we've had a team of coordinators working with different sectors on how to establish the standards in their organisation, going from tiny little 3-person churches to mass organisations that have 250 staff. They've been working really hard, taking in consultation to get these standards where they are. They're in the final process now of being approved to be mandatory for some certain sectors. When that does happen, the compliance team will then come in and take a really important role with helping people establish the child safe practices using those standards. For a while, it'll very much be educative. We're not going to come straight off the bat as soon as they're put in place and say, no, you're doing the wrong thing. Here's a couple of penalties. Have a great day. We'll be coming out and doing some assessments and working with organisations to make sure that they know how to comply, why they should comply, and what actions our office can take if you don't comply. As I said, it's going to be a while before we'd even think about taking compliance action. We want to help people get to where they are. We would only ever escalate the response if we deem an organisation to be putting children at risk, at a high risk, or if people are very just blasé about interacting with us, don't want to engage, don't want to do anything. We've tried multiple times to help them. If they take a negative attitude towards it, then we can escalate it further because we need everyone to be on board. The bottom point there, as it says, is we all need to work together. We'll do our part to help you do your part to make sure the kids in New South Wales are kept safe while they're doing activities they need to do their sport, being at school, spending time with friends, doing other activities. Gives everyone a peace of mind knowing that we can do that and have our kids do that and being kept safe. Some of the other resources surrounding the standards, if anyone wants to catch up, if you haven't heard too much about them or had a lot to do with our organisation, there's a guide to child safe standards, which I just discussed. There's an engaging sensitively with survivors of sexual abuse and how you can have those conversations if they come to you. There's plenty of resources such as the template I showed you for the self-assessment tool or the record keeping. There's a ton of other stuff in there, how to help you write a policy. There's e-learning for child safe, and there's also one for reportable conduct. If you are a mandatory reporter, that e-learning will help you know what we need in our reports and what kind of information you have to report to us. There's also a couple of previously recorded webinars that you can go in and access and get a bit more information that would be similar to this, but more about child safe than compliance. Lastly, if you want to connect with us, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. I don't really understand Twitter, but it's there. We post a lot on LinkedIn and share stories from different organizations. What we really love is for people to tag us in your workplace photos or initiatives you've put into practice about being child safe. We'll ask permission if we can share them. Spread them out to other organizations within your sector or even different sectors to say, hey, this is a really great example of how you can implement this. Previously, one of our coordinators has worked with her sector because she found a couple of churches who were doing just a fantastic job around child safe. So they went out in the previous week and actually filmed those people and did a couple of interviews, asked them some questions about how they went about establishing those practices. That's eventually going to be edited and supplied across all the different dioceses and faiths to help them get on board. And lastly, that's our contact. That's all I've really got to discuss tonight. We've still got some time. If anyone wants to jump on and ask some questions, we can happily have a chat and answer them while we're here. If there's anything you want to know afterwards, or if you have any questions about what's been discussed or something you think I might have missed or that you're just not unsure of, give us a call or shoot us an email. At the moment, email will probably be better because we're going to be very much working remotely due to the latest restrictions. But that inbox is always monitored during business hours, so you'll get a pretty quick response. So if there is anything further you need, or if you've got trouble accessing any of the info, just get in touch. We'll help you out. We're happy to talk through any problems you might be having. Any way that we can assist, we're happy to do that. So that's it from me. So I'll stay on. I'll answer some questions. People are more than welcome to hang around if you want to hear the questions and the answers. If not, you are very welcome to go and enjoy the rest of your evening. I hope you all have a great night, and stay safe through this latest bit of an outbreak. So what I'll start going through is practical difference between applying for volunteer and paid employee. The difference between a volunteer and a paid employee check is the $80 a paid worker has to get it, because if a volunteer is not working, we don't want to put an even further strain on their potential financial problems by asking them to go get an $80 clearance. It could be that they don't work, they haven't worked for a very long time, they're living off very little money. We don't want to hinder them from being able to engage in the work if it's volunteer. If someone is getting paid for the role they do need to have a paid clearance. It is a breach if they are getting paid to work on a volunteer clearance. The thing is, it's very important to remember a volunteer clearance and a paid clearance get the exact same checking. There is no difference. They get the exact same background checking. They get the continuous monitoring. It's just about letting those people volunteer within their organisation without having that financial burden. The working with children check, is it valid for 5 years, not 3 years? Layla, yes, the clearance is 5 years. Again, the only change that would reduce that is if someone was to get a bar or have their application closed. If they're doing the right thing for the whole time, your check will last for 5 years. Another one, is your help free for a church? Our help is free for everyone in New South Wales that is in a child-related organisation. We don't charge for anything that we provide. Any form of training or resources that we provide, we don't charge for any of it. We're just trying to help people do the right thing, make sure they've got a child-safe environment. So, yeah, help yourself. Go through the website. A last little mention, we have just recently developed, again, it is on compliance, but we've actually got training videos that we've developed. They're very brief, to the point, 5-minute videos on different topics that we've gone through today. But if you wanted to have other people access it within your organisation, you think it might be important for them to have a watch. Like I said, you can watch one, you can watch all of them. There's 5 videos in total. They all go for 5 to 7 minutes. They're going to be staggered out through Working with Children Check Week. First 2 have been released. They're up at the moment. But that's just something just for your consideration if it's something you want to access in the future. This webinar will also be available online in the next couple of days as well if you want to go back and rewatch it or have anyone else from your organisation watch it as well. Do you have resources in other languages? We do have some. Off the top of my head, unfortunately, I cannot confirm what resources we do have in other languages. I know there's information about the Working with Children check and the application and those sorts of things. Best bet, either shoot me an email and I can confirm what we do and don't have, or you can hit the website or contact our customer service team as well. They'll be able to help you out and tell you exactly what's in different languages. We can also go forward and produce content in different languages if we know that the requirement's there. Like if people want it, we can try and make it happen. So is that all for the questions? I'll just run through. From Layla, I'm going to register to check my teachers Working with Children check, but do I get notified automatically when their Working with Children check expired? No, we don't notify you when someone expires. That's why it's really important to have your records up to date so you can review when people are going to come up for expiry. We'll let the worker know that they're coming up for expiry, but they need to do the process of getting a new clearance, and you need to ensure you've got those records to know that's coming up. There's over 2 million applications in our system. There just is not the capacity to let people know for every single clearance that's expired for someone in the organisation, unfortunately. Where else? Is that it? I think we've answered all the questions. Yep. Okay. If no one else has any questions, we can wrap it up. I'll give you guys a 7-minute early mark. Will we share the presentation? Yes, it'll be available on our website in the next day or two. Also, I can email it out. If you just shoot me an email asking for a copy of it, I'll get that to you as soon as it's released. Suspicious behaviour. Can I share some examples of dangerous or suspicious behaviour? Oh, it's each to their own. We do cover a lot of that in the child safe training. It's people who want to be alone in a hidden area with children. They always want access one-on-one with no one else around to kids. They want to take the child away from the group somewhere. Those sorts of things. It's just got to keep an eye on it. I unfortunately cannot speak as an expert to child safe practice. I can give you a little bit of info. Best bet, if you want to do that, either jump on for our training or go on the website and contact our child safe team. They'll be able to give you so much more information and a way better answer than I've just been able to provide you, unfortunately. Okay. Any last minute questions? No, there's no certificate of attendance, unfortunately. You can take a photo of me on your screen if you want and say we've been there. You'll get an email saying it's completed and might request some feedback. Unfortunately, no, there's not a certificate that we provide. Okay. All right, we might wrap it up. The questions seem to have stopped. Do it. Just tell me to smile. Again, that's our contact info. Hit us up if you've got any further questions. Something might come to mind later tonight or tomorrow or whenever you're back in the office doing your thing. We're happy to chat at all times. So just get in contact. If you can't get us via phone, chuck us an email. Someone will get back to you as soon as possible. So last, thank you for attending tonight and taking time out of your evening to get some knowledge, which is great. And hopefully if we speak to any of you soon, it'll be for good matters, not for any compliance issues or barred workers. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.